Welcome to the She Helms Sailing Podcast. Today I'm delighted to be talking to Rachael Sprot, sailor, writer, RYA Yachtmaster instructor and examiner, and now the new editor of the Shell Channel Pilot. We chat about how sailing shaped her childhood, why she chose a less traditional career as a professional sailor, what makes a great skipper, tips for new skippers, and what it's like to take on responsibility for one of the UK's best known cruising guides.
The photos are actually one of the hardest things about it, because you're coming into port with, too much wind and too much canvas up, and you're supposed to have your camera out and it's raining and you really need to get that leading line, and before you know it you get home and you think, oh god, I didn't have that photo of that mark, and what was I thinking?
Hello, I'm Jojo Pickering. I'm a professional skipper, RYA Yachtmaster instructor, and the founder of She Helms Sailing. She Helms is a women-centred sailing community exploring seamanship, confidence, culture, and life at sea. Through this podcast, I want to share the stories of women sailors, from those taking their very first steps afloat to some of the world's most experienced sailors. Every journey is different, and every story has something to teach us. If you enjoy these conversations, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with other sailors. It will really help more people to discover the podcast. You can also subscribe to the She Helms newsletter on Substack, where you'll find articles, sailing news, and updates about upcoming podcasts. I'd also love you to join the She Helms community, where we host monthly live Zoom sessions and create a welcoming space for sailors to learn, ask questions, and support one another. And if you'd like to keep this podcast and the wider She Helms project growing, you can support my work on Patreon. You'll find links to everything in the show notes below. Welcome aboard. Hi, Rachael. It's really wonderful to welcome you to the She Helms podcast. Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed.
Hi Jojo, well, lovely to be here. Thank you very much. I'm very flattered to be asked. So yeah.
Well, it's really exciting. I know there's some things we want to talk about in relation to the channel pilot that you've just published, and some other bits and bobs. But before we start, maybe you could sort of tell us where you are in the world and where you're sitting, and what's outside your window.
What's that? I'm sitting in a little street in Plymouth, and I've got, well, outside this window, I've got the street. Outside the other window, we've got, because Plymouth's so hilly, you get these amazing vistas, and we've got a view of the Sound, so I can see the breakwater.
Wow.
I can tell
wow.
what state the tide is at, because if I can't quite make out the breakwater, then I know it's pretty high spring tide, and I can watch the ferries and the warships coming and going from a distance. We could do with a telescope, but yeah.
Or some binoculars.
Yes, but yeah, not quite as exciting having binoculars. I think we need a telescope for that kind of thing.
Well, I'm not sitting beside the sea, sadly. I'm in France at the moment, and I'm sitting in my little attic office, and out the window is the trees and the roses, and they're all looking very beautiful at this
Lovely.
time of the year. So maybe you'd like to sort of introduce a little bit about your background, Rachael, and how you started sailing, and where you've got to now in obviously a brief way.
Yeah. Well, I was taken sailing as a child. So my mum was a professional skipper back in the sort of 80s, late 70s, 80s. Yeah. And she'd been working in the Caribbean, and had actually entered the first all-female team in the Whitbread race, but ran out of sponsorship and steam before actually getting it going, and then I came along. So she eventually said, after sort of 10 years ashore with 2 children, that we needed to get sailing again and drag the family off. We bought a little 3/4 tonner, so a little wooden kind of 1970s racing boat, really. But my mum was from a classic boat background, so she kind of fell in love with this rather unusual wooden boat. And that was it. That was weekends away in Weymouth, scrubbing fenders on the pontoons and having teenage tantrums and refusing to go and being told I'd be grateful for it one day, and all these sorts of terrible things that I did to her. And then, yeah, so we used to kind of sail the English Channel, really. We were over back to the Channel Islands and Brittany and West Country and that sort of thing. And it wasn't really until I was sort of 16, 17 and started doing a bit of sailing with school that I started thinking, oh, this is actually really fun and we can go places and get away from your parents and go and have adventures independently. And I ended up taking a year out for university and working on boats. So I worked on did a couple of transatlantics, went to university and studied English for 3 years, and afterwards thought, what am I going to do? I might just go sailing for a little bit just to get my finals out of my system whilst I work it out. And yeah, my friends reminded me that that was almost 18 years ago now. So I'm still working it out, I guess.
And I think we all are still working out. And so you were quite young when you did your first transatlantics then?
Yeah, I was 18. Yeah. And then washed up ashore in Antigua, sort of looking for work on super yachts as really someone that had sailing skills, but absolutely no stewardessing skills. And of course, as a girl stomping the pontoons in Antigua looking for super yacht work, you get pigeonholed as into stewardessing, which I was terrible at. I had a few awful kind of incidents of just complete stewardess failure, including managing to swipe a Tesco's plastic bag with the iron when I was ironing some Egyptian cotton sheets for a super yacht, and I managed to swipe through the plastic bag, and next thing I knew, I'd put sort of reverse imprint of Tesco's on all this expensive bedding. So it was a relief once I kind of finally got my Yachtmaster when I was about 20, I suppose, at university, and didn't have to try and take those jobs anymore.
Yeah, no, I mean, why do we get, oh, I hate that whole thing about being pigeonholed into stewardess jobs or being treated seriously. So once you got your yacht master, were you then treated seriously as a sailor?
I think slowly. I think I was quite lucky that I worked for Clipper during the summer holidays at uni, doing doing day sails, and then doing a bit of, they had a few sort of additional offshore races which weren't part of their big round the world thing, and they was doing some training with young people as well down in Falmouth, and I got to work with some really good skippers there, and they had more of a training mentality, and there were no stewardesses on clipper boats, so that was fine. That kind of suited me quite well, really. And that's when I really started to enjoy the offshore sailing and the training, particularly because they had a really good sort of training program and culture for that sort of thing. Yeah.
No, that sounds like you landed on your feet there. I must admit that I tried to have a professional career in the 80s as a sailor, and I just had to walk away from it. Just the way I was treated was so, no one treated me like I knew anything. It was
Yeah.
appalling. It really was appalling. Things have
Yeah.
improved, luckily, but
Yeah.
so would you call your career an unconventional career?
I suppose it probably is, I guess. I mean, I think being a sailing instructor is fairly unconventional, and probably, I think probably sticking with it for more than turning into a career is probably unconventional. I think people do it for a season or two, or perhaps do it. Some people do it as a second career, I suppose, a bit later on in life. I guess there aren't as many people doing sort of committing to sailing for 15, 20 years or something like that. But yes, having said that, I'm probably becoming a bit more adjacent to sailing with the writing stuff, and migrating sideways slightly from being on the water all the time. But yeah, I suppose it is a bit unconventional. It wasn't unconventional in my family because my mum had done it, so I suppose it didn't feel like a big break from the norm, really. But yeah.
So do you want to tell us a little bit more about your writing then?
Yeah, so I suppose I just, well, yeah, I guess I started off working doing articles for Yachting Monthly, and have always done an article or two a year for them for the last kind of 10 or 15 years, I guess, maybe only 10 years. And then it's just a useful work from home job when that you can fit in around going sailing. So the two actually complement each other really well. And yeah, I find that writing and sailing somehow pair quite well, and especially if you're writing about sailing. But I started, and then I was approached about 3 or 4 years ago and asked if I wanted to do the Shell Channel pilot. So they were looking for someone to replace. Well, Tom had said he wanted to step aside from it. I think he'd been doing it for at least 35 years, so he was more than overdue a break. And his boat's in the Baltic now anyway, so they were looking around for someone else to take it over. And I guess I kind of naively thought, oh, that sounds like a great opportunity. I'll jump at that. 2 years, yeah, that'll be fine. And then about 3.5 years later, it's finally come to fruition. So it's been.
So how has that been?
Project.
What did you actually do? How did you actually have to go and visit all the different places?
Yeah, I felt I did really. I mean, because Tom's obviously done it all, but he retains copyright of everything. So firstly, these places change a lot, even over a couple of years. And I needed to re-photograph them all because he kept the copyright of all the photos as well. So I really felt that to do it properly, I had to go in and out of everywhere. And so it's taken about two years worth of sailing, plus some of the places, the Solent I already knew really well, and bits of the West Country I knew really well and didn't really have to think about. But a lot of the French coast I hadn't been to for quite a while. I might have done it back in my days as a sailing instructor, doing mile builders to Lavavrac or something, but I hadn't really gone in and out of every nook and cranny on the French side. So I did have to just try and find these windows of opportunity to go and pelt up and down the English Channel and sort of whistle stop tour in and out of these places. And yeah,
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it was.
Did you enjoy it?
We did enjoy it. I did it with my my husband. Chris came with me, and he did some work from boat in places. And there were times when he would sort of look up from his laptop and say, "Where are we?" and where were we yesterday? Have to try and. So I feel like I'm very much looking forward to doing it all again, to update it at a slightly slower pace.
Yes.
Yeah. I think with everything, these things, would be a wonderful long 5-year holiday, but when you try and compress them, it was a good adventure, that's for sure.
Yes. So, I mean, is there like a time frame when you have to update it?
Well, I mean, this is one of the things with digital. In the old days, there would just be a new edition every 5 years. These days, there's rolling updates you can download online. So, I mean, obviously, I can't resail the whole English Channel every year. So there's quite a nice sort of team of volunteers that forward stuff on and try and keep my ear to the ground. But before the next edition in 5 years' time, I'll try and revisit, if not all of them, most of them. And get some fresh photos as well, because the photos are actually one of the hardest things about it, because you're coming into port with, I don't know, too much wind and too much canvas up, and you're supposed to have your camera out and it's raining, and you really need to get that leading line, and before you know it, you get home and you think, oh god, I didn't have that photo of that mark, and what was I thinking? I missed all the juicy bits. And of course it's because you're just busy trying to get in and out for the first time.
Yes, I mean, I don't know how all these social media people do it, because I'm useless at it, because I just want to enjoy it, or I'm focusing on the moment to keep yourself safe, or because I'm teaching and I'm trying a little bit to sort of try and do little tiny videos of things to share, but I don't know how people do it. You just can't really.
Yeah,
it's really difficult.
It's a real skill, and I think probably easier if you've grown up in the age of digital actually, which I slightly miss, that sort of smartphone era. So whereas I think they're just used to kind of narrating things as they go along a bit more. It doesn't come easily to me either. And I did think for a while I should be making little videos of this. Shell Channel Pilot could have a YouTube channel, but yeah, there's that very quickly went by the way.
So you've got your own boat then?
Yes, I've got a little. When I left Rubicon 3, I bought a little 1973 long-keeled sloop, Choi Lee, so kind of Hong Kong built. It looks a bit like a Victoria 34, so she's that sort of ilk.
Very nice.
Yeah, she's kind of slow and steady and very comfortable to be at sea on. And actually, because she's American designed by a chap called Alfred Luders, who I hadn't heard of, but she's actually got really good headroom and things inside, quite a high coach roof, which actually makes her quite nice for being on. Whereas the same sort of era British boats, they're always a bit pokey and narrow and small port lights and things. So yeah.
And has your baby gone sailing yet?
No, we do need to. My mum's down here with her boat. I think that's probably going to be the easiest quick win for getting Muriel on the water. But yeah, not yet. That's very much the plan.
I'm glad to hear your mum's still got a boat as well. That's really great.
Yes, yeah, and she has. So we'll probably get out on that, which is she's a 40-foot Halberg Rassie, so that's more comfortable anyway for piling onto.
Very nice. So I also wanted to speak to you about women skippers. There actually, surprisingly, aren't that many. I mean, I think there are more and more, and certainly more and more in the industry. I did an Atlantic circuit with my family. I only met one other woman skipper on the whole trip, which was really surprising to me. And the whole thing about, they talk to my husband, not me. Anybody. It's quite funny. My kids used to find it entertaining. I mean, it's not funny, really. So I'm really interested to know what you think makes women skippers. Are we different? Are we different? Do we skipper differently than men, do you think?
I think in broad terms, yes. I think obviously there can be quite macho female skippers, and there can be very sensitive, kind of nurturing male skippers. So I think it's a gross generalization, but I think there is a kind of macho culture in sailing. And I think what women can offer is an alternative to that. That doesn't mean they always do. I've been well and truly shouted at early on in my sailing career by a female skipper. And I can think of several others that really had a kind of high volume communication style. So, but I think it's more a kind of macho culture. And I think that if women can get a bit of momentum, then we could start to help offer an alternative to that. Because I think that's the thing that I see as one of the biggest problems is not really men or women, but this sort of heroic, sort of macho alpha skipper character that sits at the back of the boat and demands a cup of tea and doesn't do any of the cleaning and just kind of it sits on their throne sort of thing. So yeah, I think what is coming through is a shift, and I think that will shift the whole industry, I hope, and that what will be sort of part of a bigger change away from this macho culture that kind of predominates.
So a different type of leadership style is essentially what you're talking about. And so what do you think those strengths, the strengths of a good skipper should be, whether they're male or female?
I think that a sort of collaborative style where you are doing things with people and you're having an adventure with people rather than doing things for people or to people or just kind of not, it's about bringing people with you on the boat and keeping everybody invested and engaged and making everybody feel kind of important and involved, really. Whereas I think the difference is, are you sailing for the whole crew, or are you sailing to kind of achieve some goal of getting somewhere? And you don't really, as long as we get there and we've all had a beer at the end of it, then we're fine, and we hit 18 knots surfing down a wave or something, and then we all had a great laugh and everybody walked away from it? Or are we sailing for the crew and for what, and in a way that kind of keeps everybody involved in it? I think that sort of, it's a kind of inclusion approach, really, which is by no means just a sort of women's thing, but I think generally speaking we are more adept at that emotional work. And I think the focus on emotional safety and feeling safe is actually a really essential part of safety, that if you don't feel safe, you don't perform well. You do silly things because you're in passenger mode. So you know, there's such a power balance between skipper and crew, or there can be, because the crew are in such a foreign environment. They really don't know anything about, the sea potentially, and they are often complete kind of rabbit in headlights when they get on board, understandably, as I would be if you took me diving or something like that, and you could tell me to do absolutely anything in scuba gear and I would follow the instructions and I would do it. And I think that power imbalance is really important to be mindful of, and that we need to try and treat that very softly, so that really your crew can flourish and be part of the adventure. And often people will make really valuable contributions if even very new sailors can make very valuable contributions if there's the right atmosphere on board for them to contribute. But if they're put down or made to feel silly or shouted at, then that just kind of kills,
or ignored
that. Or ignored. Yeah, true. So I think creating that inclusive culture is the challenge for the sort of 21st century sailing instructor. And I think the 20th century sailing instructor that stood at the back on the backstay and oversaw and pointed and gestured and said, "Where's my next cup of tea and pasty coming from?" is hopefully, more or less the thing of the past now.
There was in my mind, there was sort of two things. There's the sort of there's leadership style of skippering is one thing, but then there's the culture of the industry. And yes, you create inclusive culture on your boat, but then alongside that, you kind of need an inclusive culture in the industry as well. How do you think we are doing on that side of things?
I mean, there's probably been a small improvement over the years, hasn't there? But it's a slow one, I think, especially in yachting. I think the dinghy sailors are streets ahead of us, and partly just because it is more accessible, it's cheaper, it happens close to shore, so the whole thing is a bit easier to manage. I think yachting, especially in this country, still has a lot of accessibility issues, which don't necessarily need to come down to finances, because there's so many boats sitting in marinas with no one to sail them. There's plenty of boat owners, there's just not enough crew. And I think, and part of that is, I think people assume you need to spend a fortune and kind of go and buy your own boat to go sailing, when actually there's loads of opportunities, but you need to know someone to get into them, or you need to know where to look. So we're not very good at getting that message out. And you have one bad experience, get shouted at, or a skipper goes out in more weather than they're really comfortable and can cope with, and the crew get scared and stuff happens, and it doesn't take very much to put people off. So yeah, I think that's the bit that needs working on, really. And I think that does come back to the macho culture thing. But yeah, I mean, yeah, things are improving. I think especially within sail training, there's a lot more young women coming in, which is great. I think that's really changed and shifted. But wider kind of boat ownership is probably slower. I mean, it must be very different in France because it's such a kind of popular sort of every man, every woman sport in France. I feel like the boats are much smaller and cheaper and everyone's kind of rushing to get on the water. Or am I slightly rose tinting?
Possibly. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm an expert at knowing the French sort of culture of sailing, but it's amazing when you see them sending out the 2 to 3 year olds on these little boats, and then they get them in Optimus when they're really young. So they actually do, if they're beside the sea, they learn really early. And I think that makes for really good sailors, and that seems to be equal male and female. I still think there is the male female divide. I think that still occurs. And then if you sort of try and widen it out and think, well, actually, it's not just also about men and women, inclusivity is for everybody. And it is still a very sort of, if you like, middle class, white middle class sort of sport. And partly, as you say, because people don't always know or realize that there are routes into it that don't necessarily cost a load of money. And you can find a way if you really want to. And I think that the sail training industry is, as you say, is helping with that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think another resource that's really underused is the local yacht clubs. I mean, some of them can be very snooty, but a lot of the local clubs are actually really down to earth and friendly. They've got club racing going on in the evenings. You don't even have to give up a weekend, and you can jump on a boat and go and race around the cans for the evening. So, yeah, I think, and I don't know whether the sail training side of things tees into that sort of, they're quite separate. The sort of, if you're in the RYA training schemes, you sort of have this ladder of progression, but then there's also kind of sideways to that, you could just go and do club sailing. And I'm not sure we're so good as instructors at pointing people towards, well, hang on a minute, there's a yacht club down the road there, you've done your comp crew, rather than feel like you need to go and shell out for day skipper immediately as the next way to get any sailing done. Why don't you go and join them? They've probably got a cross-channel regatta and a boat with a spare bunk or whatever, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I feel like making those connections aren't always obvious when you don't know the industry. And yeah, and you're right, there's a real kind of snob factor associated with yachting, which needn't be there and isn't there for a lot of people, but it can put people off.
Yeah. And with a lot of my work with sort of trying to support women sailors, I find that there's a real lacking in confidence. I think that's another issue that I've encountered.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I guess I feel like I've been very lucky that I can and did often, still do, ring or text my mum and say, I've got this dial up, I'm being blown on in 30 knots or whatever. What do you think? And just have someone to talk it through with. And that has been really invaluable to me. And when I think about the sort of lack of confidence, I think that's what's helped me get over it. Because I think there is an element of you just never are fully equipped as a skipper to deal, where you can be fully equipped, but you're never kind of fully experienced. You've never seen everything and done everything. You're always faced with new scenarios that you're having to think around, and you're not quite sure if it's going to pan out, but you've got your kind of exit strategy. If it doesn't work, then I'll do this instead. And that, being happy in that space of I'm not quite sure how this is going to pan out, but I've got a safe back out plan, has been what sort of helped me get over some of those leaps. And I think I'm generally pretty conservative skipper. I just think I'm out there too often. If I'm a risky skipper, there's more chance of something going wrong. So I play things pretty conservatively. But yeah, I think having a mentor that you can ring when you're lying in your bed, or send a text at 10 o'clock at night and say, I'm actually really worried. Should I be attempting to go to this port tomorrow? It's going to be blowing on shore. It's a bar. What do you think? And have that phone call has, I've been really lucky to have that. And yeah, which is why I think having this sort of community of sailors is so valuable, because if someone could stick that up on a wall at 10 o'clock at night, or a group WhatsApp or something, say, does this make sense or not, then it can just give you the confidence to go and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that can make a huge, huge difference. So when you just a moment ago said that you think yourself as a conservative sailor, have you had any issues with that? Has anybody like twisted that and therefore said you are not so confident, or you're...
No, I don't think they have, actually. Or if they have, they haven't said it to me. They've said it behind my back, which I really don't mind. If people want to think that, that's kind of fine. Yes, I sort of often think, oh, other people would have done this and they probably would have got away with it. But I feel like in my mind, it would have been getting away with it. The sort of risk of it going wrong would have been too high for me to be comfortable with. But obviously they were happy with that level of risk. Yeah, I think usually your crew will be very accepting. If you've got novice crew on that you're training, they're usually very accepting and are happy. I think most people are quite happy that you're taking safe, conservative decisions, actually. I think if you're a novice, that's sort of what you want.
So I think you're right about that. And I would describe myself as a conservative sailor. I'm much more interested in keeping everybody happy, keeping the boat safe and keeping the people safe. And I've never had any issues with the people. And you can give them more time by sailing a bit more conservatively. And therefore it gives you more time to teach, to coach. So I think there's a positive circle there.
Yes, yeah, I think that's really true. I mean, one of the things that I always still have to remind myself of is how long things take when you're teaching. And you kind of think, 20-mile passage, we'll have that done in 3.5, 4 hours. And there's always, actually, we need to do a jibe and we're not quite ready for the jibe. We need to talk through that. So that's going to take us 20 minutes. And then we're going to drop the mainsail slowly and explain it as we go. And yeah, always takes longer than you think, doesn't it, when you're doing it for teaching rather than doing it as a kind of, a group of people that just know the boat and need to get it from A to B.
But the joy is when you do that and you do it carefully to start with, then the next day they've learnt it and it takes half the time.
Yeah.
A few little quick questions here. What book would you recommend someone to read? Putting you on the spot here, sorry.
I think a sailing book that I really enjoyed and still think about is Pete Goss's book. I think it's called Close to the Wind, about how he financed and got his kind of first ocean sailing races up and running. And that was really very inspiring. I really enjoyed that. And I don't go in for very many sailing books, actually. I should read more widely on the sort of sailing front. But that was a great read. And I still think about him. I think he ended up sleeping on a park bench or something because he needed to get the sponsor. He didn't have the money for a B&B when he was going to talk to a sponsor. So he went up, slept on a park bench or something ridiculous, and thought, yeah, that's really inspiring stuff, and also shows you what's involved in getting that sort of campaign off the ground. And yeah, probably made me think that's probably a bit more effort than I would go to.
He writes really nicely, actually, doesn't he? I've read his book and I enjoyed it. Yeah, he writes really well. So next question, what piece of advice would you give someone who wants to make the leap from crew to being first skipper steps?
I think it's having I think the most important thing is having a good first mate. And too often that leap is made with untrained crew as your crew. And what you really need is to have a friend, maybe someone else that you did your day skipper with, that's also on board, or just a well-trained, if you're sailing with your partner, then your partner needs to have gone and done a bit too. Ideally, you've both got your day skipper. I think it's massively stressful if your crew are completely novice and you're fairly new to it as well. So I would say training for the other people on board, I'd almost say that's more important than going and doing loads and loads of tickets yourself. Get some useful crew.
Yeah, I agree. And as a professional skipper, I really value the skills and knowledge of my mate on board the boat. It's really important that you have someone that's just there who's hopefully as experienced as you.
Definitely.
Okay, so what are your plans for the summer then?
Oh golly, well, I'd like to get on the water somehow. I'm still kind of working out how that might happen with a 3-month-old baby. That's going to be, it's not so much the getting on the water, it's getting the boat maintenance done and the boat launched. That's the and getting her down from her drying. She's up the river liner, so she's got a kind of 3-mile passage over sort of drying mud banks, which isn't really buoyed and not really very well charted to get out, which is fine. I've done it a few times now, but that, now when we've got a baby on board, I think, if we do end up stranding or the boat goes aground and we're stuck there and have to get in the dinghy or whatever, that's all more complicated now. And I'm the skipper, and I can't just kind of sit there and feed her for 40 minutes. I'm going to have to be concentrating on the navigation and getting us out. And so, that's going to be my challenge this summer. Whether I achieve it or not, we achieve it, I'm not sure. I'm not going to put myself under loads of pressure to do it. If it happens, great. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't.
Well, sailing with your mum sounds like a good backup plan.
No, that's the best option. She can skip her and then I can just be crew in the background. Yeah.
Sounds good to me. Oh, thank you, Rachel. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
You
really
too,
has.
Jojo. Yeah, thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the She Helms podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review and share it with someone who loves sailing. It really helps others to discover the podcast. Remember, you can also subscribe to the She Helms newsletter on Substack. And if there's someone you'd love me to interview, I'd really like to hear from you. If you would like to support the work I'm doing, please take a look at my Patreon page. You'll find links to everything in the show notes below. Until next time, fair winds, and thanks for listening.